So in this video, I'm going to put a disclaimer out. The South shouldn't have won the Civil War. They had to be brought down, and history shows that the Union Army did that. But in this hypothetical video, I'm going to show you how the South could have won the Civil War if they just tweaked a couple of things. And I'll show you by showing you a map of America in 1860. Oh, for a second. Yeah. Okay. Now, this is America in 1860. Now, we know that the Civil War was fought from 1861 to 1865. So, this is prior to the secession. This is prior to the secession. This is America as a whole. These are the states so far: North, South, Western states that America bought already. These were territories, and we fought for Mexico. So now, let's show you a map during the secession times. Yeah, here we go. So, here's 1860, late 1860. This is when Lincoln won the election. So now, Texas is going to be one of those states that follows their own constitution. That's why we call it the Lone Star State. So they're going to secede, but not right away. So you're going to have North Carolina secede first, and then 6 others follow, being South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee. And then Louisiana, Texas, so on and so forth. Now you have the South, then you have the North. Okay, so we know that by now California was a state, so was Oregon. They were part of the Union, and these were all territories. These were in state shape. They would become states later on, though. So we know that in 1861, the Civil War happened. Now, when the Civil War happened, the prime target was Washington, D.C. for the Confederates. And the prime target for the Union was Atlanta, because that's where the capitals were. Confederate States of America, their capital was Atlanta. United States of America was Washington, D.C. This is where Lincoln gave the speech, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." So now, (1861) to mid-1863, the Confederate Army is kicking the Union Army's ass. Historically speaking, this is accurate. So, how do the Confederate Army get Washington without going through Gettysburg? This is what I'm saying. The South could have won the Civil War if they avoided Gettysburg, because facts show that while the Union Army didn't have great equipment, like they didn't have a lot of ammunition like the South did. The South had an endless supply of cannonballs, bullets, rifles, and all that. The Union Army had so much because it was industrial, and therefore they were making a lot of money as compared to the South, where it was still agricultural and everyone was buying their products. So now, up to this point, like I said, the Confederate Army is kicking the Union Army's ass. But here's the problem. Instead of going from, because Richmond, Virginia is where Robert E. Lee's home is. Now, Fort Sumter is the first battle, which I believe was a Union victory. And rightfully so, it should have been. Now, after the first loss of the Civil War, the Confederate Army, more so Robert E. Lee, said for all the other armies to come up through a certain standpoint, which means if people were coming from Georgia, more so Atlanta, Georgia infantry, they came up from Atlanta through South Carolina, cutting northwest through North Carolina, through Tennessee, through Kentucky, through Ohio, and into Pennsylvania, Gettysburg. Now, this is in 1863 at this point. Well, that's not a good thing for the Atlanta Army to leave Atlanta. That's not a good thing. Because prior to 1863, prior to the Battle of Gettysburg, Washington, D.C. was highly protected by the Union Army, while Atlanta had no protection. Now, if the South wanted to win the Civil War, this is how they should have done it. First of all, have the Atlanta, Georgia Regiment stay in Atlanta, Georgia, for them to not even move to guard Jefferson Davis and the Confederate States of America, the capital. Now, they should have also had Florida regiments, more so from Tallahassee, to also protect the capital of Georgia, Atlanta. Why? Well, the more men you have protecting the capital, the more harder it is for the Union Army to break through those lines, those Confederate lines in the South. And this is why the Union Army was well prepared to fight whoever tried to get to Washington, D.C. So it would be a hard line to get through. However, though, they were very weak in Georgia, protecting the capital. Now, how could the South win the Civil War without Gettysburg, without even getting involved with Gettysburg? Because by this point, Robert E. Lee and the Confederate Army, they were the superior army by this point, but they were running low on food and ammunition. So my suggestion is, and unfortunately, since the Atlanta regiment left Georgia in order to fight in the North, this is what they should have done. For the first, 2.5 years, they should have done exactly what they did before, except instead of cutting through Kentucky on a northeast angle and through Ohio into Pennsylvania, they should have done this. Cut through Kentucky, through Indiana, through Illinois, make a loop into Missouri, right through Kentucky again, go through North Carolina where they're the strongest, fight through Virginia, boom. They got their target. They got Washington, D.C. then. That's what they should have done. That's how they could have won the Civil War if they would have done that. But they didn't. This is what they did. Now, why was this a problem? Well, here's the problem with their roots. Is that they came in from the west. Like not southwest, not northwest, but the west. Instead of ambushing the Union Army, they let the Union Army ambush them. Here's what I mean by that. When they came in through Pennsylvania and into Gettysburg, more so for food and ammunition, what happened was Meade's army was prepared to fight. However, though, they were a little bit lazy prior to the Gettysburg Battle. And so everything was smooth sailing until July 1st, 1863. And we all know what happens with the Gettysburg Battle, the bloodiest battle in the whole entire Civil War. More Union soldiers were killed than anything. But why did the South lose Gettysburg? Because they had fewer people. While the Union Army had people going, like with the help of Ulysses S. Grant, Tecumseh T. Sherman and all them, while they were busy trying to get Atlanta, which was an easy target for them because, like I said, Robert E. Lee didn't make sure that Atlanta was protected, while the Union Army made sure Washington, D.C. was protected. So, while Meade's army is kicking the ass of the Confederacy and basically pretty much fucking them up for the remainder of the war, this is what Tecumseh T. Sherman and Ulysses S. Grant are doing. Now, at this point, Ulysses S. Grant is in Kentucky. This is where his regiment is, and he's in control of the whole Union Army, but this is where he is. Tecumseh Sherman is somewhere in North Carolina. Now, they're writing letters back to forth, back to forth, back to forth, while they're fighting off to get to Atlanta, Georgia. Lincoln in Washington's worried that he'll lose the election. So, but he's also pissed off that Meade lagged for a long time, because when the Confederate Army was coming in from the west, that was the point where they were in the ambush where Meade and the Union Army could have captured, arrested, or killed members of the Confederate Army that were marching in through Pennsylvania to Gettysburg from the west. So, instead of taking the opportunity, there was a battle at Gettysburg. Now, should Ulysses S. Grant, who is in Kentucky, should have basically talked Robert E. Lee into withdrawing any possibility of winning the Civil War? Yeah, he should have, because at that point, the South could have, rightfully so, been taken down, but that didn't happen. Instead, it ended in West Virginia, where one of the early battles took place. So, while the Confederate Army is basically on a downslope from this point, and the Union Army is the stronger one because of Ulysses S. Grant, who's in Kentucky, and Tecumseh Sherman, who's in North Carolina, making his way into Atlanta, Georgia, taking it over. more troops from New York and Ohio are being called into Gettysburg and into Washington for more protection. And the ones that are being called into Gettysburg are being called either the 2nd of July or the 3rd of July in order to help with the big battle. You see my point, though. If you see my point, though, right? The South could win the Civil War if they would have avoided Gettysburg. And that would be scary if they would have won the Civil War. And I'm not going to say that, oh, would have been a good thing. No, not at all. It would have been a horrible thing. But thank goodness they didn't win the Civil War, because we know which country we would have been living in. I just want to point this out because if you're into history like I am, American history at that, you know, the interesting thing is all these hypothetical what-ifs and these alternative history lines pop into your head and thinking, wait a minute, this could have happened if it went like this. And that's the interesting part, because I didn't think of the South could have possibly win the Civil War until I took the battlefield tour today. I didn't really think about it until today. But then looking at the map and realizing, oh, wait a minute, if they would have looped, they would be able to get Washington, D.C., their primary target. But they didn't do that. They ended up fucking themselves up. And the Northern Army at this point in 1863 is nothing too hot to trot to cheer about either, because prior to Ulysses S. Grant taking over the Union Army is fighting like okay. Prior to the Battle of Gettysburg and prior to Ulysses S. Grant getting involved by taking over the whole Union Army, here's the problem. The Confederate Army is playing chess, while the Union Army is playing checkers. And when you're in war, it's a battle of chess, not checkers. So Robert E. Lee is hoping when they're getting to Gettysburg that the Union Army is as weak as they've been, but that's not the case. They're stronger at this point. But he was in for a big surprise when he got to Gettysburg. But like I said, they could have won if they avoided Gettysburg. If Gettysburg never happened, the South would have won. And that's a scary thought. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. See ya.